Marcus Henderson stood in his marble-floored kitchen, staring at his opened refrigerator with disbelief. The leftover roast beef from last night's dinner was gone. The expensive imported cheese he'd barely touched had vanished. Even the fresh strawberries he'd planned to have with breakfast were nowhere to be found. His hands trembled with rage as he calculated the cost of the missing food. It wasn't about the money, he could buy 1,000 meals without blinking. It was about trust, about respect, about the principles that had built his empire from nothing. Sofia Martinez had been working as his housekeeper for 3 years. She was quiet, efficient, and had never given him a single reason to doubt her integrity. But now, standing before the empty shelves, Marcus felt betrayed. He'd trusted her with his home, his personal space, his sanctuary. And this is how she repaid him? The 42-year-old tech mogul had built his company through strict discipline and unwavering standards. He demanded excellence from everyone around him, and he'd never tolerated theft or dishonesty. His success hadn't come from being soft-hearted or making exceptions. Every decision was calculated, every relationship transactional. When Sofia arrived that morning, her usual warm smile greeting him, Marcus felt his jaw clench. She moved through the kitchen with familiar ease, beginning her daily routine of preparing his breakfast and organizing his schedule. Her graying hair was pulled back in its customary bun, and her weathered hands worked with the gentle precision of someone who took pride in caring for others. Marcus watched her every movement, waiting for a sign of guilt or nervousness. But Sofia remained calm, humming softly as she cleaned the countertops. The sight of her composure only intensified his anger. How could she act so innocent when she'd been stealing from him? "Sofia, I need to speak with you," he said, his voice cold and controlled. She turned toward him with concern in her dark eyes. "Yes, Mr. Henderson. Is everything all right? I want you to look me in the eye and tell me you haven't taken anything from my refrigerator." Sofia's face paled slightly, but she maintained eye contact. "Mr. Henderson, I would never take anything that doesn't belong to me. You know this about me." Her words felt like another betrayal. The lie was so smooth, so convincing. Marcus had built his fortune by reading people, by detecting deception in boardroom negotiations and business deals. But Sofia's denial seemed genuine, which made it even worse. "I trusted you," Marcus said, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "I welcomed you into my home. I paid you well, gave you benefits, treated you with respect. And this is how you repay me? By stealing food from my kitchen?" Tears began forming in Sofia's eyes, but she didn't speak. She simply stood there, absorbing his accusations with a dignity that somehow made Marcus even angrier. "I want you out," he declared. "Pack your things and leave. I never want to see you again." Sofia nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging with defeat. "I understand, Mr. Henderson. I'll get my belongings." As she walked toward the utility room where she kept her personal items, Marcus felt a hollow victory. He'd protected himself, maintained his standards, and sent a clear message about the consequences of betraying his trust. Yet something about her reaction bothered him. There had been sadness in her eyes, yes, but also something else. Acceptance, perhaps, or even understanding. The days that followed felt different in Marcus's penthouse. He hired a cleaning service to maintain his home, but the sterile efficiency of the professional staff couldn't replace Sofia's caring touch. The fresh flowers she'd arranged weekly were gone. The small touches that had made his house feel like a home had vanished with her. Marcus tried to focus on his work, burying himself in meetings and acquisitions. But late at night, alone in his vast apartment, he found himself thinking about Sofia's final moments in his kitchen. The way she'd accepted his decision without argument or protest. The dignified way she'd gathered her things and left without causing a scene. 2 weeks after firing Sofia, Marcus was leaving his office building when he noticed a commotion across the street. A small crowd had gathered around someone sitting on a bench outside the subway station. As he got closer, he recognized Sophia's distinctive silver hair. She was sharing sandwiches with 3 homeless individuals, carefully dividing what appeared to be a modest meal into portions that would feed everyone. Her own lunch bag sat empty beside her, its contents now distributed among people who clearly hadn't eaten in days. Marcus stood frozen, watching as Sophia spoke gently to each person, asking about their day and listening to their stories with genuine interest. One man was telling her about his struggles to find work after losing his apartment. A young woman was explaining how she'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. Sophia nodded compassionately, offering not just food but dignity and human connection. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. The missing food from his refrigerator hadn't been stolen for personal gain. Sophia had been taking leftovers, food that would have been thrown away, to feed people who had nothing. She'd been using his discarded meals to perform quiet acts of charity that he'd never witnessed or acknowledged. His throat tightened as he remembered her words, "Would never take anything that doesn't belong to me." In her mind, she hadn't been stealing. She'd been rescuing food that would have gone to waste and transforming it into sustenance for those who desperately needed it. Marcus felt his legs carrying him across the street before his mind had fully processed the decision. Sophia looked up as he approached, surprise and wariness mixing in her expression. "Sophia," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the street noise. She stood slowly, her dignity intact despite everything he'd put her through. "Mr. Henderson. I owe you an apology," he began, but she shook her head gently. "No, Mr. Henderson. I should have asked permission. I understand why you were upset." Her grace in the face of his cruelty was almost unbearable. Here was a woman who'd lost her job for trying to help others, and she was apologizing to him. "I was wrong," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "You weren't stealing. You were being kind. You were seeing needs that I was blind to and meeting them with generosity that came from your own sacrifice." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. "I want to offer you your job back," Marcus said. "But more than that, I want to ask for your forgiveness. And I want to help you help them." He gestured toward the small group of homeless individuals who were watching their conversation with curiosity. "I want to fund what you're doing. I want to make it bigger, better, more sustainable. I want to learn from you how to see the world through eyes of compassion instead of suspicion." Sophia studied his face for a long moment, searching for sincerity. What she found there must have satisfied her, because her stern expression gradually softened into the warm smile he remembered from their first meeting 3 years ago. Over the following months, Marcus learned that Sophia's acts of kindness extended far beyond sharing leftover food. She regularly visited elderly neighbors who had no family nearby. She tutored children in her apartment building who were struggling in school. She volunteered at a women's shelter on weekends, teaching job interview skills and helping women rebuild their confidence. Together, they established the Henderson Martinez Foundation, dedicated to addressing hunger and homelessness in their city. Sophia became the program director, using her deep understanding of community needs to create initiatives that treated people with dignity while providing essential support. Marcus discovered that his wealth, when guided by Sophia's wisdom and compassion, could create impact he'd never imagined. But more importantly, he learned that true success wasn't measured in profit margins or stock prices. It was measured in the number of people whose lives were touched by kindness, whose hunger was satisfied by generosity, whose hope was restored by someone who cared enough to see their humanity. The empty refrigerator that had once symbolized betrayal became a reminder of how quickly assumptions can blind us to truth. Sophia's simple act of sharing leftover food had revealed not theft, but a heart so generous it couldn't bear to waste resources while others went hungry. This story reminds us that behind every action we don't understand lies a human heart with its own struggles, dreams, and capacity for love. Before we judge others, let's pause and consider that their motives might be purer than we imagine. Kindness is often hiding in plain sight, disguised as ordinary actions performed by extraordinary people. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories for more inspiring tales that celebrate the best of human nature. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that compassion can transform both the giver and receiver in ways we never expect. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone isn't money or success, but the chance to show us who they really are.